I want to begin my talk with the beautiful, phenomenal, late Maya Angelou. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave, I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise. Today I want to talk about thinking and doing, or more specifically, dreaming and designing spaces of hope. I do interdisciplinary research that looks at how stress gets under the skin to affect your health and well-being, and then how you can do things to decrease your stress and improve health. And so I work in Chicago, and as many of you know, Chicago is experiencing increases in violence. Since January, the murder rate has increased 84% from last year. There have been 131 homicides. The shootings have increased 200%. There are 605 individuals who were shot and killed. And I work on a program that's an intervention program, education and research program, and it's called DREAM, or Developing Responses to Poverty Through Education and Meaning. And then we also want to build a DREAM center where we can house the program, and that aspect of the project is called DESHI, Designing Spaces of Hope, Interiors and Exteriors. And we want to build DESHI in Englewood, in the heart of Englewood, actually. And Englewood is undergoing lots of violence. It's one of the most violent places in Chicago. And it's one of the aspects that I'll talk about later in terms of the hidden America. But I also want to stress that there are lots of good things that are happening in Englewood. There are families there who are raising children, who are doing dynamic things. So when I think about the words, I am the dream and the hope of the slave, I think about these pictures. Bob Edelman took them, and I thank the Westwood Gallery for allowing me to show them today. And they're pictures of my grandmother, who is there with a hat, and my cousin who has the towel on his head. And then also my aunt, my great aunt, who took care of my great-great-grandmother when she was a slave, or after slavery, when she was getting older, and my great aunt was a young girl, she took care of her. And I believe that I stand on their shoulders and inside their audacious hopes and dreams. For many of them, their humanity was hidden behind chattel slavery, behind Jim Crow. In 1903, W.E.B. Du Bois said, "The problem of the 20th century is the problem of the color line." And I argue today that the humanity and lived experiences of so many Black women, that they remain hidden behind class and color lines, that there's an economic line, a race line that's drawn around what I'll call a hidden America, and others have called a hidden America. But before this idea of a hidden America, Michael Harrington wrote a book called The Other America in 1962, and he made the argument that in the midst of the post-war boom, that there were families who were unable to take care of themselves, they were unable to feed their children, and that they were often isolated. In 1967, a year before his death, Dr. King also picked up this issue, and he gave a speech at Stanford, also called The Other America. And you'll notice when you see the book that it says the book that sparked the war on poverty. And so when the Other America became known, there was this great investment in ways to decrease poverty, Social Security, food stamps through jobs. And we did have some success, especially in terms of elderly poverty. And so now, fast forward to 2012, ABC did a series of reports called The Other America, and they did a report in Chicago called Don't Shoot, I Want to Grow Up. And David Ford, who's an ABC correspondent, he defines the hidden America as places where many low-income families, they're raising kids in violence that's unfathomable to most people. And that's the part I want to touch on some, this really hidden aspect of it, and that the rates and the consequences of this violence are really dramatic, they're really drastic, and many of us, we really can't imagine what it's like. In some ways, I can identify with the mothers that I work with. I'm an African-American woman. I have two sons. When I was growing up, I watched my family struggle at times to put food on the table. But even as I talk with them and I hear their experiences, it's still hard for me to imagine what it's like every day to feel like your life is at risk, to send your children out into the world and to feel like they may not come home, the stress, the heartache that's associated with that. And many of us, we don't have to live that, we don't have to imagine it because of our race and or our class privilege. And then another way that things remain hidden is through this ideology of individual achievement, right? We talk about that in America, you can be anything you want as long as you work hard, as long as you have gifts, you have talents, you have abilities, but often we leave out of those conversations racial discrimination and discrimination in other areas that prevent individuals from achieving. So the goal of my research is to pull back this veil of the hidden America, to have the mothers talk about their lived experiences using their own words. So in 2012 and 2013, we did focus groups, we did interviews of about 100 mothers, and we asked them, so what is it like to live in neighborhoods with constant violence? What is it like to feel that your children may not come home? And I've talked to mothers whose children did not come home. And, oops, sorry. And we also asked them for 5 milliliters of blood. And we thought that they wouldn't give their blood because we wanted to look at how the stress gets under the skin, how it affects the immune system, and how it functions. And the mothers were very interested in that aspect because they were experiencing lots of stress reactions to their bodies. And so there was one day I was finishing up an interview, and one of the mothers came to me and she said, I just want to say thank you for coming and asking us how we're doing, for thinking of ways you can support us as we try to make changes. And she said that people don't understand it's the little things that make a difference. And so that was a big shift for me because I came kind of thinking about policy, what do we need to change in terms of social structures? And what I heard her say was that recognizing that these are really difficult conditions, these are conditions that no one should have to live in or no one should have to raise their children in. And I saw her, I felt that she was saying, thank you for recognizing her humanity. And so we talked to another mother who had 2 children who were shot in a carjacking. And unfortunately, her 16-year-old child was killed. And so she talked about the emotions that she went through, the depression, the rage, the anxiety, the whole range of it. And she also talked about what she perceived as a different environment from what she was growing up in. She said when she was growing up, you didn't go to kids' funerals. Who went to a child's funeral? And she said, ain't nobody died but your grandma or your grandpa. And again, as she talked about her anguish, during that conversation, she said, but you know what? A child isn't born to be a killer. And as she talked about that, she talked about things in society that sometimes leads to that. And then this other image that you'll see is a memorial from Kids Off the Block. Diane Latiker put it together, and you might not be able to tell, but it's bricks, and it has the names of young people who have been killed by gun violence. And when I talked to Diane, she said that sometimes, some days she can hear the mothers screaming as they're grieving for the loss of their children. So as you can imagine, that there is a lot of emotional anguish from living in the hidden America. The mothers that we talked to, about 48% reported experiencing depressive symptoms, and about 56% reported experiencing post-traumatic stress symptoms. Again, the stress from that, they have a high cost on their bodies. They reported having headaches, backaches, stomach pains, that their hair was falling out. They reported having panic attacks, having a loss of sexual appetite, and the list can go on in terms of the consequences of the stress from living in the hidden America. But it's important to remember also that the mothers had hopes and dreams about what could change about their future. And so my team members, we developed a program called DREAM. My team was Drs. Robinson, Roberts, Laris, and many others at the university. In fact, in some ways, we're in uncharted territory because the program is so interdisciplinary. We have faculty and students from over 28 departments or units on campus, and we're looking at poverty as this grand challenge issue, and we're coming with our skills, with our expertise, and we're trying to figure out how do you solve this big problem in the US. And then the part where we want to build a health and wellness center in Englewood, Deshi, my co-founders, Doctors McKee, Lammers, and Uline, we were invited by the French government to go to Paris, France, to talk about the Deshi model as possibly being an international model. And so one thing the mothers really talked about that they wanted was this intergenerational space where they could come together and share knowledge. They were not interested in oftentimes what you hear, oh, it's the young moms, and the young moms felt like they had information that they can give to the older moms. So they're really interested in coming together and sharing knowledge. And I put this slide up because transformation was a theme that came out in their stories. They wanted to transform things about their lives. They wanted to transform their neighborhood. They wanted to give their children a safe space to grow up in. One thing they would say when we came, almost many of them, do you know about jobs? Do you know anyone that's hiring? And of course we didn't. They wanted to improve their education. They wanted their children to go to universities like the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. And I have this image of the butterfly because I was in the bookstore one day and I saw this plain book and it caught my attention because the words on the cover said, just when the caterpillar thought it was all over, it turned into a butterfly. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And so I got the book and I thought about at times that we all experience when we really feel like, oh my gosh, can I recover? Can I come up? And to just have that hope of transformation. But sometimes in the hidden America, it really is over, right? There's a lot of death in Chicago. There's a lot of death from gun violence, from chronic disease and other factors. And it's really important that people have a space to mourn and to grieve and hopefully to dream about a different future. And so I'm working with Lisa Butler. She's a producer and director of a documentary called What's Left Behind. And so the purpose of that documentary is that we want the mothers and the fathers and the siblings and the cousins of people who have lost young children to violence to tell their stories and to talk about the grief and to talk about what changes they would like to see in society so that others won't have to experience what they experienced. And so as part of the Dream Center, our hope is to build 4 buildings. One of them will be the Fannie Lou Hamer Sick and Tired of Being Sick and Tired Wellness Center. And Fannie Lou Hamer was a sharecropper and from Mississippi, and then she ended up being one of the leaders of the civil rights movements. And in that center, we would have health promotion activities, and one of them would be Sociogenomics for You, a course that talks about how stress gets under the skin to affect health. And I would work with Dr. Jean Robinson on that one, that program. One of the buildings would be the Maya Angelou Still I Rise, a Beautiful, Phenomenal Woman Art Center. And that will house all genres of art, from paintings to photographies that capture the beauty of Black women and Black girls, to films that talk about their lived experiences, or films that talk about the anguish, as we're doing, of burying children. And then also for people who are writing books, writing poetry about hopeful pathways forward into a brilliant future. Sorry. Okay, the next one will be the Harriet Tubman I Got a Right to Death or Liberty Restoration Center. She escaped from slavery in the mid-1800s, but she made numerous trips back into the belly of the beast to recover the humanity of others. And so at that center, we want to have job training, entrepreneurial activities, and college preparation activities. And basically what we want to do in that center is to nurture the genius and the talents of individuals that they may achieve their dreams, and maybe serve as a model for the criminal justice system as they think about rehabilitating individuals. Because as the mother said before, people may have killed, but they weren't born killers. There are certain factors that led to that. So really, I'm trying to unpack that. So then the final building for the Dream Center would be the Shirley Chisholm. Our country needs women's idealism and determination. think tank and policy institute. So she was elected to Congress in 1969. She served 7 years. She was a representative from New York. In 1972, she became the first major party black candidate to run for president. Many people don't know that. And the readings at the center would cover the idealism and activism that black women have engaged in that have reshaped American society through policy and other efforts. Activities at the Institute would include analyzing policy and coming up with new bills, new ideas, new initiatives that will help all citizens. And Chisholm, she stated that it is not heroin or cocaine that makes one an addict, it is the need to escape from a harsh reality. And so I returned to my image of the butterfly for inspiration about how we can change as a country. The butterfly goes through distinct stages of the egg, and then the caterpillar crawling on the ground, and then inside the cocoon where it's hidden but it's undergoing changes, and then it emerges as a butterfly, the dramatic flight of the butterfly. And so I argue that what we know of as the US has changed dramatically over time. I do not stand before you in the harsh reality of my great-great-grandmother, who was a slave and who, as the family stories go, would sneak out of the slave cabin at night with her feet cracked open because she didn't have shoes, and she would sleep by the chimney of the slave master's house because it was warmer there than in the slave cabin. I do not stand before you as an escaped slave, as Harriet Tubman, who knew that she had a right to liberty, so she risked her life to escape to freedom. And I don't stand before you as my great aunt, who was a sharecropper and who had to spank her son once because he drank from the white water fountain, and white individuals gathered around to see if she was going to uphold Jim Crow. And so she did it, but when she got home, she apologized to him and said, "You had every right." She said she was sorry. And she said, "You had every right to drink from that fountain, but I had to do that because if I didn't, they may have come and killed our family, or they may have taken you when you were going to school, and I wasn't going to let that happen." And so that same boy with the towel on his head, he told that story to Dr. King when he was in town. And Dr. King said, "What your mother said was right. And I'm here to tell you, you were right, that you had every right to drink from that water fountain." And he said, "Well, that's what I'm here. Those are the things that we're trying to change." And so if I don't stand before you as those women, who do I stand before you as? I stand before you as a witness to racial and class lines in the US and hidden America that cast a veil still on the lives and lived experiences of Black women. Dr. TEDxUIUC calls this period the new nadir. Michelle Alexander calls it the new Jim Crow. Many of us, regardless of our race, class, gender, sexuality, of our age, we feel compelled to say what the activists Garza, Colors, and Tomiti say, that Black lives matter, because Black and brown bodies, male and female bodies, and oftentimes children's bodies are being killed in the streets. So it is my hope that we pull back the veil on the hidden cost of living in America, or living in this hidden America. It is my hope that we can eradicate color and class lines and re-envision what we think of as US society. And recognizing these needs for structural shifts will be the foundation for programs like DREAM, like DESHI across the country and around the world. When we were in France, we saw that issues of stress were issues, and lack of access to resources were issues that Black mothers experienced there as well. So I will end as I began, bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave. I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, my children rise, and my great-great-grandchildren will rise. Thank you.